Some testimonies are spoken only once, whispered in the infirmary before silence claims the tongue forever. They tell of weapons that breathe, of barrels that twitch as though scenting the blood yet to spill, of living claws that coil around their wielder's arm with the possessiveness of a parasite. No scribe of the administratum records such accounts officially. Yet among soldiers who have faced the great devourer, the memory of these weapons lives on, carried like a wound that will never close. To speak of a Tyranid gun is to speak of a creature. These are not tools of war, no assemblies of steel and powder, but organisms cultivated within the swollen vats of hive ships, fed and fattened until they are joined to a warrior brood through strands of nerve and sinew. They pulse with the rhythm of alien hearts. They secrete their own mucus, their own venom, their own larvae, each awaiting release into the galaxy's banquet. When they fire, it is not the discharge of a machine, but the regurgitation of life, an expulsion of organisms bred for nothing but destruction. Veterans who survived Macraga and Ichar 4 spoke of the realization dawning mid-battle, that the weapon in the Tyranid's claws was not an extension of armory, but of anatomy. The carapace rippled, the muzzle flexed. In some cases, the ammunition itself could be glimpsed, writhing just beneath translucent skin sacs, eager to be hurled at the foe. To face such an enemy is to stand before a mirror of war's most obscene possibilities. Every act of firing becomes an act of birthing, each battle a harvest in which the field itself is seeded with new life. The Imperium has catalogued many of these weapons: spine fists that chatter like insect mandibles, barbed stranglers that throb with strangling creepers, devourers that vomit swarms of beetle things. Yet to name them is only to graze the surface. What matters is their nature. Each Tyranid weapon is alive, and it kills with a will not entirely its wielder's own. This is what horrifies the soldier in the trench or the Astartes in the red haze of melee. The sense that the gun has already chosen them, that even before the shot, it hungers. What can discipline avail against such knowledge? A laser gun burns, a bolter tears, a plasma burst sears, but none possess the malice of a sentient weapon that exults in its act. The dread lies not only in death, but in the intimacy of it, in the certainty that when a Tyranid raises its arm, it is not alone. The weapon itself yearns to feast. The opening chapter of this litany must end where the horror begins, in the recognition that the galaxy is seeded with predators whose guns are mouths, whose ammunition is flesh, and whose every shot is a brood born to destroy. The next chapter shall unveil what emerges when these living weapons disgorge their first children into the ranks of mankind. It begins with the devourer. To the eye, the creature appears little more than a swollen limb fused to its bearer, its flanks quivering with sacs heavy with brood. Yet what it disgorges is not ammunition, nor even venom, but larvae, each round a living parasite, born with the sole imperative to seek flesh. When fired, these worm beetles strike with mindless frenzy, boring through armor, chewing through muscle, and spreading into every corridor of the body. The victim rarely dies at once. Soldiers collapse screaming, their nervous systems seized in spasms as the brood gnaws its way towards spine and brain. Autopsies from Tyranid battlefields tell of rib cages hollowed out, vertebrae webbed with larvae, hearts and lungs reduced to colonies of twitching mouths. To be hit by the devourer is not to be slain, but to be colonized. More terrible still is its kin, the brain-leech devourer. This strain carries worms bred for a single appetite, thought itself. They surge through the blood toward the skull, devouring neural tissue with unerring precision. Infected soldiers stagger onward, their eyes glazed, their speech slurring into incoherence. Then come the convulsions, jaws snapping until teeth splinter, fingers clawing at their own faces, as though they could tear the invaders out by force. Some linger alive even as their memories are consumed, their voices babbling fragments of half-remembered prayers, while their minds are digested from within. The horror is not in death, but in erasure, the stripping away of the soul until only a breathing husk remains. If the devourer is infestation, then the death spitter is dissolution. Its sacs bulge with larvae steeped in corrosive bile, maggots slick with burning enzyme. When expelled, these living projectiles impact in explosions of acid slime, each maggot gnawing through ceramite, flak, or flesh. Armor buckles and sloughs away, skin boils, bone hisses to vapor. The cries of the afflicted form what survivors call the choir of dissolution, a cacophony of men dissolving alive, their voices joined with the chittering of the maggots that consume them. In some cases, the maggots burrow toward nerve clusters, prolonging agony as they flood the victim's body with their corrosive banquet. The Tyranids deploy lighter symbiotes as well, no less insidious for their simplicity. The spine fist grows in pairs, each hand of the host capped by a living gun that spews jagged spines at close range. To face a brood of gaunts armed thus is to be confronted by a storm of bone fragments, each spine a shard torn from the creature's own body, propelled with enough force to pierce carapace and flak alike. The spines lodge deep, their barbed tips preventing removal, forcing the victim to bleed out as the battle rages. Then there is the barbed strangler, a grotesque organism whose bulbous throat heaves before vomiting a cluster of strangling creepers. The projectile bursts upon impact, releasing tendrils that lash around prey, constricting with crushing strength. Many guardsmen have been found crushed within coils of fibrous muscle, their limbs broken, their breath cut off as though the battlefield itself had risen to strangle them. To see comrades dragged into such an embrace breaks the resolve of even veteran regiments, for this is not mere death. It is suffocation at the hands of a plant-animal hybrid bred to entwine, to throttle, to silence. What unites these weapons is their fidelity to suffering. They do not kill quickly. They consume, they infest, they dissolve, they choke. Their purpose is not simply to eliminate resistance, but to destroy morale, to teach the prey that no armor, no discipline, no faith can prevent their bodies from becoming the brood pens of the hive mind. Against such living arsenals, even the most disciplined formation falters. What hope stands when one's comrade erupts into a mass of writhing larvae or collapses in silence beneath a nest of strangling creepers? Thus the swarm advances, not by speed alone, but by the terror carried in each round fired. Every parasite, every maggot, every worm is a sermon in hunger, declaring that the galaxy itself is meat, and that to resist is to be devoured alive. When the Tyranid swarm presses beyond skirmish lines and into the heart of battle, the hive does not rely solely on parasites or stranglers. It unleashes its heavy bioweapons, each one grown for devastation on a scale no imperial arsenal fully matches. These are the living cannons, the corrosive maws, the explosive spores, artillery grown in wombs of chitin and ichor, designed not merely to kill, but to unmake the ground itself. Foremost among them is the venom cannon. At first glance, it resembles a cluster of fused carapaces, its barrel a segmented tube veined with pulsing sacs. Within those chambers brood grubs steeped in caustic venom, their bodies swollen with toxins that ferment until volatile. When fired, the venom cannon hurls them with bone-shattering force. Upon impact, they burst in floods of corrosive ichor, the acid spraying outward in clouds that can melt armor and sear tanks down to skeletons of twisted metal. Many an Astra Militarum vehicle, from the humble Chimera to the revered Lehman Russ, has been reduced to slag in seconds, its crew dissolved within. Those fortunate die instantly. Those less blessed endure screams that echo long after the weapon itself falls silent. From the same lineage comes the heavy venom cannon, scaled for monstrous organisms such as carnifexes or hive tyrants. Its projectiles strike with such violence that even fortifications crumble, walls eaten away as though the very stone had grown soft under the hive mind's will. There are reports from the defense of TerranBrah of bastions collapsing not from bombardment, but from being hollowed by successive bursts of venom larvae, leaving entire companies buried in their own fortresses. Yet corrosive artillery is but one chorus in the swarm's symphony. The rupture cannon, mounted upon living behemoths, births massive bioprojectiles designed to pierce the hides of titans and the hulls of warships. Each round is a living spear, a cluster of reinforced bone and muscle tissue packed with volatile fluids that detonate upon impact. When they strike, shockwaves ripple across the battlefield, sending bodies tumbling like leaves before a storm. Many Magi biologists insist that the rupture cannon is not a single weapon at all, but an entire colony of organisms working in unison. An ecosystem bound into a gun, each discharge a coordinated act of living destruction. Even more insidious are the spore mines. These drifting sacs are birthed from biovores, creatures bred solely to lob them across the battlefield. They drift, bobbing on invisible currents, pulsing within a light. When proximity triggers them, they burst in clouds of acid, toxins, or incendiary chemicals. Infantry that once thought themselves secure in cover find themselves engulfed, their lungs burned away by spores finer than dust. Worse are those who live long enough to feel the spores hatch within them, their veins swelling as larvae squirm through muscle. In many campaigns, spore mines have served not as weapons of war, but as terror fields, floating reminders that the very air has been weaponized, that the ground itself cannot be trusted. The swarm also wields bioplasma, channeled through creatures such as carnifexes. These living engines build storms of ionized matter within their gullets, charging it until their throats glow like furnaces. When released, the discharge incinerates anything it touches, boiling metal and flesh alike in flashes of white-hot light. To witness bioplasma at close range is to see a living star belched forth in the midst of battle, a sunseed hurled by claws and hunger. Entire squads have been vaporized in a single blast, their shadows burned into the walls behind them as their only remains. Nor should the Stranglethorn cannon be forgotten, kin to the barbed strangler but magnified for monstrous hosts. Its projectiles burst into tangling creepers upon impact, pinning even tanks in place beneath a sudden eruption of vines as strong as iron cables. Immobilized, the prey is left helpless as the swarm surges forward to finish the feast. Each of these weapons is more than ordnance. They are extensions of a single truth, that the hive mind does not wage war for territory or vengeance, but for consumption on a planetary scale. Where Imperial artillery is death metal and chemical propellant, Tyranid artillery is alive, cunning, and vindictive. Every venom cannon discharge, every drifting spore mine, every pulse of bioplasma is an act of appetite made manifest. To face them is to see the line between predator and battlefield dissolve, to realize that even the ground beneath one's feet has been turned into the swarm's larder. And yet, these horrors are not the final word. Beyond the heavy weapons and spore storms lurks another level of terror, the close-quarter biomorphs that shatter bone with every sweep, that drink blood with every cut, that roar with the hunger of gods at war. These are the melee tyrants of the swarm, the blades and claws that tear through champions and leave only shredded corpses behind. When the swarm closes the distance, the horror shifts from infestation and bombardment to the intimacy of the blade. It is here, in the crush of melee, that the Tyranid arsenal reveals its most primal face. For every gun it grows, the hive mind breeds 1,000 blades, talons, and whips, organs fashioned for rending, snapping, and drinking life at the closest range. Foremost among these is the scything talon, iconic in its simplicity and pitiless in its function. These limbs, grown as vast scythes of bone and chitin, swing with enough force to shear through ceramite plate and split a tank's hull. Each strike is guided not only by the wielder's muscle, but by sensory nodules in the weapon itself, twitching and adjusting mid-arc to ensure the edge finds purchase. Veterans of countless crusades attest that no shield holds against them for long. Astartes have been seen cut down in full battle plate, their bodies falling in two neat halves as the talon sang its wordless hymn of slaughter. If the talons are the arms of harvest, then the rending claws are the teeth. These hooked digits extend with sudden violence, puncturing armor before snapping shut like a predator's jaw. They tear rather than cut, dragging prey into dismemberment with grotesque intimacy. Many guardsmen who survived the first Tyranid incursions describe hearing the claws clicking against each other in hunger before the charge began. To be caught is not to be slain instantly, but to be pulled apart, tendon by tendon, until only ribbons of meat remain. Other breeds carry the bonesword, a weapon whose very matter hums with psychic resonance. These semi-sentient blades are sheathed in bioplasma fields, capable of slicing through even force fields and power armor with contemptuous ease. What sets them apart from other Tyranid biomorphs is their hunger for essence. Those struck often feel their strength ebb even before death, as if the blade drinks spirit as well as blood. A duel between a hive tyrant wielding twin boneswords and a company champion has no parity, for the very weapon conspires to drain courage and life in equal measure. Then comes the lash whip, a sinuous appendage that moves with reflexes faster than human sight. Its tendrils wrap around arms, legs, or throats, dragging warriors into the arc of a killing blow. Some variants secrete toxins that paralyze muscle, leaving victims stiff and helpless as scything talons descend. Entire squads have been immobilized in seconds, their bodies strung together in coils before being hacked to pieces. The swarm's melee arsenal extends into grotesque mutations such as the acid maw, a jaw weapon brimming with secretory glands that belch streams of flesh-eating enzymes. A single bite can liquefy armor and bone, leaving only a steaming puddle where a soldier once stood. Even more terrible are the tail scythes and crushing claws of monstrous creatures, each blow strong enough to flatten a dreadnought or swat a sentinel aside like an insect. Yet beyond all these horrors lies the realm of the Bio-Titan. On that scale, Tyranid weapons become ecosystems in themselves. Hierophants stride into battle with biocannons the size of cathedrals, each shot a living missile packed with corrosive grubs and volatile tissue. Bioplasmic torrents stream from their gullets in arcs of living fire, reducing entire platoons to charred silhouettes in moments. Cluster spines rain from their backs, exploding into showers of shrapnel beetles that burrow into the wounded. Every step of these monsters is a siege. Every volley, a campaign of extinction compressed into seconds. The lesson of these weapons is not simply their lethality, but their purpose. Every claw, every lash, every cannon exists to enact the hive mind's design, consumption without remainder. The swarm does not fight for territory or pride. It fights to render prey into biomass, every scream another note in a dirge as old as the void itself. And yet, even as these living weapons carve their dreadful harvests across the stars, the Imperium resists. Guardsmen stand in the choking air of spore-choked worlds. Astartes clash with hive tyrants in duels that echo through legend. Titans fall, but new ones rise. Humanity, outmatched in scale and science, endures in faith. For though the swarm wields weapons that live, breed, and hunger, man wields the one force it cannot digest, the will to fight, no matter the cost. The tale of Tyranid weapons is thus the tale of the hive mind itself, an intelligence that has turned biology into arsenal, appetite into artillery, hunger into blade. To know them is to understand what it means to face a predator not of one world, but of the galaxy entire. And to endure against them, even for a day, is to testify that mankind still claims its place in the stars.